What's up, guys? This is the David the Dog Trainer podcast, episode 5. 5 episodes in, we made it past the month. Fifth one seems a little less exciting now. Dobe, what's been new?
Not much. Surviving. Glad that we're doing this on the regular.
Very exciting times.
We've kept ourselves in those first quotes that we said on the first episode. We've kept ourselves true to this podcast.
Yeah, you know. I mean, the 10 a.m. thing got interrupted by some punch keys this morning.
It did. I had to.
But
you didn't eat one. I'm very upset.
I know. I'll save it for later.
Okay.
All right, cool. So things are cruising along well. I think last week was one of my favorite ones that we've done so far. I think it was very insightful. I think it was an important one. Dog parks, things like that is something we get asked about very, very frequently. So being able to kind of take an entire episode and dive into that topic, I think was definitely needed. And honestly, I didn't expect to go as deep into it as we did. Honestly, last week was under my interpretation going to be a more random podcast. I think I even said it at the beginning. I was like, this is going to be kind of a random podcast. And it wound up being the opposite of random. So today is going to be a little bit more of a random podcast. We have multiple different topics. I got a couple different books in front of us here. I got a couple different things on my phone we're going to be going over here. The podcast keeps gaining traction. I think I looked at the numbers the other day, and I think each episode we're very closely nearing over 200 views on. Obviously YouTube. I really think Spotify has been the easiest form of listening for people. I think that's probably where people are utilizing it the most, and via the analytics I've been seeing, that's kind of been the case. The video is important, but I think that audio version of it is significantly better. So that's been cool. We've been getting more and more feedback from people on what they think of things. I think that just different types of people are starting to find the podcast and find some value out of it. I've noticed, from my personal page, a lot of the people that have been messaging me about it are people that we kind of know. Friends, clients, things like that. From the Miracle Canine Training page, we've been getting quite a bit of traction from other clients that I personally don't really know. So with Miracle Canine Training at this point, like basically 99% of the board and trains, I don't interact with a whole lot. We have a lot of clients in and out of the facility that I don't personally know. They work with our other training staff and stuff. So I think that the podcast has also been cool to take maybe some of those people that don't know me and kind of fill them in a little bit more on some of kind of my philosophies and thoughts on things, and to be able to hear a different perspective, because all of us at Miracle Canine are kind of preaching the good word of a very particular style of training, but we're kind of articulating it to our clients in our own individual ways. So
okay.
I think one of my favorite things about doing the long form that I've talked to about some of my clients and stuff so far is because all of these podcasts are pretty much like 2 hours or so long, I find myself kind of reiterating certain points and being able to grasp those concepts in my head, feeling like I have more time to talk about them. So it comes out in different ways than I would say it in a 1 hour long lesson where it's like, boom, I got like 4 seconds to talk about this thing before we have to move on to the next thing, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's been pretty cool. Josh, have any of your friends listened to this podcast?
I think so. I think actually Michael.
Oh, yeah?
Michael? Yeah, he was telling me about it. So
nice.
I think it's got a lot of organic growth so far, which is wonderful to see.
Yeah.
Especially for just doing it and just throwing it up on our social medias and stuff. So
I would completely agree. So it's been good. So we're going to start off today with another fan question. We'll call it a fan question, maybe.
Okay. I like that. I like the sound of that.
So this is, do you remember Tahoe?
Yeah.
From Columbus?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so Abby, Tahoe was a board and train that we did at our Columbus facility back in my last company. He's like an Australian cattle dog. His owners were living in the Pennsylvania area at the time, I believe, and brought him up for that board and train. And she's kind of followed along with us ever since. She's brought Tahoe and her other dog up to our Cleveland location once we closed down our Columbus one for some follow-up support and stuff, and has been a regular as far as asking questions and following our content and things like that. So she sent me a very interesting video that I'm sure you've seen this go around a little bit. but it is this new trend that I don't know if it started on TikTok or what it is, but it's the dogs talking, utilizing like the talk buttons.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yep.
Yeah. So
outside.
Yeah.
Outside. Yeah.
And they all have those robot
like
voice. Stephen Hawkins voices.
Yeah, it's the worst voices ever.
So, anyway, so she sent me this video from a page called Hunger for Words. And she asked, I really want to know what you guys think about this trend in the dog world of adding in all these buttons. Please talk about it on the next podcast. And listen, if we get a direct, please talk about this on the next podcast, we're probably going to talk about it on the next podcast because we don't really have that many of those. So keep telling us what to talk about on the podcast. All right, so we're going to play this video. I'm going to see if I can hold this up in a way where the camera can hear it and that you can see it. So here we go.
Collar blanket.
So the dog is pushing buttons.
Your collar is on. Go get it. Blanket from the couch. Back here.
Oh my God.
I have so many thoughts about this.
Blanket.
Look at this guy just snoozing on the couch too while it's going on.
Blanket.
Here's blanket.
Hi.
Oh, Jesus Christ. All right, so basically what we're watching here is we're watching a dog in front of this platform of, what is this? There's 4, 8, 16, 30. There's like literally like 60 buttons on this thing, right? And each one of them has a different word on it, right? So she's standing in front of it. The dog pushed 2 buttons, collar and blanket.
Yeah.
2 words that have no correlation to each other, right?
All.
So the girl then starts creating things in her head of what this dog is actually intending to say by this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So she then proceeds to have an entire conversation with the dog of collar blanket. Oh, collar is on. And she starts typing out the collar is on because obviously the dog was intending to tell her, listen, lady, my collar's on right now. I just want you to know because it doesn't look like you know, but I'm just telling you my collar's on, right?
Yeah.
Then she goes, blanket is on the couch, which again, sure, right? Like if maybe the dog saw the blanket over there and was like, yeah, that thing right there. I want to say collar blanket, right? Whatever. So she goes and she gets the blanket and she puts it down and the dog kind of runs over to her, licks her face, then goes and lays on the blanket, right? So let's read the caption to this. We all make mistakes. In this video, Stella said collar blanket, which are right next to each other on her board. That was an unusual phrase. So I responded to each word individually to see what she was trying to say because we could talk to our dogs and they understand all of these different individual words and full sentences.
Yep, they went to English class.
I modeled collar is on, then went to get Stella's blanket. When I laid it down, Stella licked my face, rubbed her head on the blanket, and plopped on it. Given the context, her typical communication patterns, and her reaction when I brought her blanket out, I think Stella accidentally hit collar when she was trying to say blanket. Mishits like these are similar to when verbal speech users accidentally say the wrong word or sound, or when we're typing and press the wrong key. In fact, the average adult human makes speaking errors 2 to 3% time. I'm making speaking errors all over the place here. 2 to 3% of the time in normal conversational speech. Occasionally, mishits are typical and expected, even in proficient communicators, and are more frequent when AAC users are still learning. It's all part of the process. Okay, so here's the thing. So first thoughts on this particular video, then I have a couple of articles that I looked up in relation to this kind of stuff. First off, we all do make mistakes because I can't fucking talk today. So I don't know if it's a lack of coffee or what. But anyways, so I've seen this go around a couple of times before this was sent to me. I don't think I ever really thought a whole lot about it, but I'd seen some different patterns where people were having dogs press certain buttons and different things were arising from it, right?
Yep.
Couple things. One, do I think the dog actually understands how to communicate with us? Not in this context, not utilizing words and stuff, right? If you look at any word that we use with our dogs from an obedience training standpoint, right? All of our individual commands and stuff like that. One of the biggest misconceptions that I see, or I don't even know if it's a misconception or if it's just something that clients just accidentally do without really realizing it, is they have these assumptions that the dogs already know what all of these words are, right? So, for example, we'll see people that come in with younger dogs, and they'll tell me things like, it's like my dog doesn't know what sit means, right? Or it's like my dog doesn't know what down is, or something like that. And I always look at them and I was like, that's because they don't, right?
Yeah.
Like, all of these words that we use, they're cues, right? The dog doesn't know the English language just from puppyhood, right? We have to teach what these individual words mean, right? So because of that, if it seems like the dog doesn't know what sit is, it's because you haven't taught them what that word means yet, right?
Yeah.
So now let's break down. We can teach the dog individual cues, right? We could teach them that certain things mean certain things, right? So in the case of, the blanket, right? You could teach that when you say blanket, the blanket comes out. When you say blanket, the blanket comes out. Or you could teach the dog that when they push a certain button, the blanket comes out. When you push a certain button, the blanket comes out, right? Just through classical conditioning, right? So dogs are smarter than we think that they are, and they can process things and kind of learn different patterns. I think the problem with a lot of these different soundboards and stuff like that is you figure, again, this one in particular has got like 60 things to it, right? So when I've seen a lot of these things online crafted, it seems like a majority of those buttons are for things that just dogs kind of naturally like, right? So a blanket or a bed, right? A treat, being hungry, going for a walk, their leash, right? All words that we in our minds can kind of shift and correlate into the dog wants this thing right now, and because the dog wants this thing right now, they're communicating to me that they want this thing, as opposed to they're just learning that when they hit random buttons on this thing, that good stuff tends to happen, because it's not going to be anything negative.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like, I'm sad. I'm depressed.
Yeah.
Right? Don't leave for work.
Yeah.
All of these different types of things, because you couldn't, like say the dog hit like I'm sad but was looking like really pepped up and stuff while they hit it. Well, you can't correlate those two together, right? You can't make it seem like that's actually what the dog is communicating, because you could see in their body language that that's just not the case, right? So I think that people get a little over the top with this kind of stuff. And I think that it is one step closer to all of the issues we've talked about in every episode we've done so far of people humanizing their dogs and trying to read too much into our dogs can communicate really, really effectively with us, right? Which is just not the case. Dogs learn that they can elicit different responses out of us by doing different things, but they don't frankly understand what those things are. So other examples that we'll see in our day-to-day, right? If your dog comes up to you and they just come over and just slap their paw on your leg, right? There is a 99% chance that when they do that, it's going to get you to do something, right? 9 out of 10 people are going to not just ignore their dog completely when their dog does that, right? They're going to pet the dog. They're going to get up. They're going to go give the dog water. They're going to go let the dog outside. They're going to do one of any number of things that's going to make it seem like the dog is communicating with you effectively. But the problem is, a lot of that kind of stuff is not even so much the dog communicating their needs and stuff like that in a way that they understand. A lot of that is the dog just learning that they can control you, which will stem into other behavioral problems later on, right? So, I mean, listen, like if you want to get one of those soundboards and you want to start teaching your dog random things and making it seem like the dog actually understands how to talk to you, that's fine. But I think that collar blanket doesn't have a whole lot of meaning to it. So anyways, in order to dig into this a little bit more, I pulled up 2 articles, one of which is just talking about this new trend right now, and the other of which I think does a really good job of digging into what might actually be going on in the dog's head while this stuff is happening. So let me pull these up here real quick.
You know what? This makes me feel like lab rats, you know?
Yeah.
Where it's like there's two buttons. If they push the one, they figure out that they get the cheese.
Sure.
So we basically have made our dogs into lab rats. That's how I feel about it.
Sure.
Because it's not the words. It's if I push this button, I get a reward.
Yep. I would agree with that. And I think that there's something to be said about the science behind. Let's simplify this. Let's remove a pad that has 60 different buttons on it, right? And let's put one that just has 2 buttons on it, right? And let's have one of those buttons be a neutral sensation, right? Or not neutral sensation, just a neutral noise, right? So something that doesn't actually mean something. And then let's have one, be one that elicits some sort of positive response, right? And let's make it be one consistent thing, right? Like, let's say going outside, right? Whatever. So we can teach the dog at that point to distinguish the difference between those 2 buttons. We could teach them to distinguish that one of those buttons, nothing happens. One of those buttons, something positive happens, right?
Yep.
And they're going to be able to, over time, correlate that when I hit this button on the right, it means to do something. The one on the left means to do nothing, right? So we can train complex behaviors like that. That's frankly how scent work dogs are trained, right? Whether you're doing narcotics detection, explosives detection, whether you're just doing fun training with like birch and like other sorts of like hunting scents and stuff.
Yeah.
That's how you train those types of things, right? So we used to do a lot of work with narcotics detection, and essentially what you would do is you would get a bunch of boxes that have holes in them, and one of those boxes would be the hot box, right? So it's the one that, in this case, had a particular odor to it, that when the dog stuck their nose in that box, they got rewarded for it consistently. So something positive happened. So it was the charged one, right? And then we would have multiple other boxes that were exactly the same that did not have the odor, that they could stick their nose in that all day long. They weren't going to get rewarded for it. So what happened is, over time, as they realized that this one right here is the one that gets me rewarded, they would start just ignoring all of the other ones, even though they looked exactly the same. Now, in this case, there was an odor that helped them distinguish the difference between them. In this case, with the 2 buttons that we're talking about, they would have to distinguish either that it is the button that's consistently in the same spot, so the one on the right side, so you wouldn't be able to switch them up or anything, or maybe it had a different texture to it, or it was shaped differently or something like that you could teach them that, right? So we can teach our dogs to quote-unquote talk to us, right? But when we say talk to us, everybody wants to humanize this and look at it like my dog is actually communicating these complex things to me, right? And they're understanding these words. Like we make up these stories in our head about how they're understanding these words that we're saying, and they're really grasping, I want you to take my blanket from over there and put it down over here, or this or that, right? We make up these stories with it. So anyway, so going to this first article, can dogs talk? How to teach your dog to talk with buttons, right? So, and again, we got another dog here in front of some buttons. Again, in this case, the problem is there's so many of them, right? And because there's so many of them, all of these buttons have positive correlations to it. There's no distinguishing the difference between anything. Like I said, where you could distinguish one is neutral, one creates this, or one creates this, one creates this. The dog can't figure out that all of those mean one very specific thing, right? So anyways, our dogs are incredibly smart and can learn so much about the human world, including words and phrases, which is true, right? We can teach them different words mean different things, right?
Yep.
Every dog owner has enjoyed conversations with our canine companions. We tell them how our day went. We share our secrets. We comment on their adorable, fluffy faces. Our dogs respond with toothy smiles, tail wags, and sometimes lick to the cheeks. But when it comes to our dogs talking back to us, we're usually limited to interpreting their canine body language. Also, I want to point out here that this article was written by Haley Bergeland, and then this is something that drives me nuts in the dog training world. Do you see all of these credentials after her name?
Oh my God!
Those? Right. So something that's very common in the dog training world here is everybody wants to ask, and here's the thing, owners don't typically ask this. Other dog trainers ask this to try and be assholes. They ask, are you certified? do you have a certification, right?
Yeah.
Because I do, because after my name, when I type it out, I'm going to put CPDTKA, CBCCKA, RBT, it's like all of these different certifications, meaning that they're just certified in all these different types of dog training, right? Here's the problem with this, right? There is no nationally recognized dog training certification, right? So I can, just because I feel like it, create 4 different types of certifications that I'm going to start certifying all these other trainers in. Josh, you want to learn how to train dogs? I am going to create the David Turpak official dog training certification, and it'll be, DTO CT, whatever, you know what I mean? And as soon as you pass my 2-week course on that, you're going to be able to put those credentials after your name, right?
Wow.
And then I'm going to go ahead and do this, and then after that, I'm going to go ahead and you're going to put those credentials after your name. So the problem is people use this just like people actual doctors and people that have actual degrees and stuff like that put things after their name, right?
Yep.
And the thing that drives me crazy is in a lot of cases, people will utilize these certifications as some sort of reason why they're better than the other dog trainer, right? Which is just frankly not the case. So diverting here, whatever. Dog training certifications are not real. If you see people putting dog training certifications after their name, I encourage you to look into those individual ones and find out that there is the only person that says that those things hold any water is the people that actually know what those things are, right? Yeah. Outside of that, it means literally nothing because there's no regulation in that industry. Whatever. Drives me crazy here. And especially when I see articles like this of this is a person with 3 individual dog training certifications trying to justify why these dogs understand what these buttons are. So anyways, on the other hand, maybe you've seen some of those recent popular dogging or talking dog videos on TikTok or Instagram where dogs push sound-emitting buttons to communicate with their owners. The dog standing next to a row of buttons that have pre-recorded words pushes one of the buttons with their paw and words like more and now are heard. It seems as though these dogs are using human words to tell their dog moms and dads that they... Jesus Christ. That they want more walkies or need more snacks. But are these button-pushing dogs actually talking? Well, the science is still out on this one, but it's definitely a neat trick you could teach your pup. So basically, the whole point of this, are they actually talking? Well, we don't know.
Yeah, we have no idea.
There's no science behind it, but we're going to say that it looks cool. If you want to give Spot another way to communicate his needs with you, you could certainly teach your dog to talk using word buttons by using positive reinforcement and a learning technique called shaping, where you teach a behavior bit by bit over time. You could teach any dog this fun skill. So again, you look at this. Yeah. So if a dog learns to press word buttons and then presses outside toy, we don't know if that's actually a request, an observation, or if it's just the dog pushing random buttons to earn a treat. The story of Clever Hans is a good example of this dilemma. Although Hans was clearly a wonderfully smart horse, it was eventually discovered that when he appeared to do math, read, or perform other amazing mental feats, he was picking up on cues from his teacher, not actually answering the problems himself. His abilities did not prove that he could use language the way people do, and science has yet been able to show that dogs possess those higher-level language skills either. Can you teach your dog to talk? Teaching a dog to use human words isn't the same as teaching a dog human language, but we could teach them ways to use human words. Dogs are great at building associations and picking up on cues in different contexts to create meaning. Like in the Stella the Talking Dog videos, we could teach our dogs to press buttons that say things like outside, play, or ouch. From there, it's really up to you to decide if you think you are carrying on a conversation with your dog. So... It's just ridiculous. It's like there are ways to occupy ourselves, right? And I think a lot of this stuff started during a lot of the quarantine-related things.
Yeah.
I think people are getting really, really bored with their dogs, frankly. And I think because of that, we're finding ourselves digging into these different topics and stuff that just, different ways to occupy their brain. And it's just, I don't know. It's just throwing me off a little bit. So... frankly, I don't believe these dogs are talking to you. I think that... What is this one? I think that a lot of these dogs are not figuring this kind of stuff out. I feel like I had one. My links are getting mixed up here. I'm trying to figure out if I read the first one or the second one first here.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, even in that article, she just used a lot of words to say, we don't know. Or, maybe they're communicating with you. Like, I feel like she was trying to prove a point and she couldn't prove it. And then she kind of noticed that towards the end of her own article. I mean, hey, good on you. Like, if you can get your dog to do that and it helps you with your dog, okay. But I think what you're trying to get at is you're not actually having a conversation with your dog. You've just taught your dog another cue.
Yes, I would agree with that. Okay, so this is the one. So I believe this one here is from... this is somebody that has a little bit more of a background in some of the psychology, this kind of stuff. So we're going to dig through this one for a minute. So this one is, can that dog on Instagram really talk, right? So any pet owner knows that her pet is the best one. There's real joy in bonding with an animal, a being that loves you unconditionally and is unburdened by bills and career woes and impeachment hearings. Sure, you know that when your dog looks at your steak and lifts a paw, he wants a piece, but you want a deeper way to connect. If only there were some way to really talk to our pets, to know what they really want, and for them to know just how much you love them. Enter Stella, an adorable chocolate-covered Catalua and Blue Heeler mix. Her person, Christina Hunger, is a speech-language pathologist who discovered how dogs can talk. According to the Instagram page she's made for Stella, her followers more than doubled in a week after People magazine ran a November 4th profile on Stella. Nearly 500,000 people are watching Hunger's post, which show short clips of Stella pushing buttons that play recordings of words like play, outside, and eat. In each post, Hunger translates Stella's button pushing. In one of her earlier posts made in July, Stella pushes outside, and Stella, which Hunger says in her post, is an example of how Stella combines words to tell us what she wants. In more recent posts, Hunger is excited to Stella's progress. She says Stella has combined good and bye to say goodbye, and that later Jake is Hunger's partner, in response to him doing a chore, meant to do that later. I'm no dog expert, so all I can say is that Stella is a very good girl, and she deserves all the treats, belly rubs, and outside time she desires. As a former cognitive scientist, though, I wondered what's actually happening in these videos. There's a long and storied history of animal enthusiasts and researchers trying to teach language to animals. In particular, to our cousins in the primate family, who scientists reasoned are most likely to share our language abilities. People have spent decades training chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas to speak, using sign language or soundboards similar to Stella's buttons. And while primates have demonstrated an impressive ability to sign words or press soundbar buttons, researchers have pointed out flaws in these animals' trainers' extraordinary claims. Penny Patterson, handler of famed gorilla Coco, would often interpret for Coco. For instance, she once explained that Coco didn't really mean to sign nipple during a public event, but instead signed it to represent something that sounded similar, like the word people. So this is exactly what we saw in that initial video, right? Mm-hmm. She pushed two buttons, collar and blanket, and the owner then interpreted what does that mean and created a story based around those things. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, yes, any person who spends a lot of time around an animal learns to pick up on their signals. My dog has learned to paw at blankets to tell me she wants to get underneath them and to offer a high five in exchange for whatever delicious thing I'm eating. But we necessarily project a bit of ourselves into interpreting what another being wants, especially when we don't speak the same language. Even when talking to other humans, we often hear what we want to instead of what the person is really saying. I think we're all guilty of that. I'm impressed that Stella's learned to press buttons, and I'd guess that more than likely Stella even knows that some of the words mean, especially the ones that might result in an exciting reward, like ball or walk. So like we talked about, a lot of those buttons are going to equate to something positive that no matter what, the dog is going to like. So if they hit one of those, let's say 1/4 of the buttons or 1/3 of the buttons, the dog is going to elicit a response when we take that thing out that's going to make it seem like it's the correct thing, that they intended to do that and that they're excited now for the response from it.
Yeah.
But Hunger makes some bigger claims worth digging into, because if they would be, in clickbait parlance, big if true. Dog cognition is an area of study has steadily grown over the past decade, probing dogs' self-awareness, problem-solving abilities, and attention to humans' communicative cues like pointing or eye contact. We're still learning about what dogs know and if they're capable of, and it would be news if, as Hunger claims in one post, a dog could plan future events and express those desires, like wanting first to eat and then play afterwards. I wanted to learn more about how Hunger trained the dog and how she selects videos to post, but she did not respond to my emails. Instead, I enlisted a couple of dog cognition researchers to help me unpack the themes in Stella's posts. Brian Hare, an evolutionary anthropologist at Duke University and founder of dog intelligence company Dognition, agrees with me that the Stella project is endearing and fun. I think it's wonderful that she is excited and she's training her dog, that she wants to communicate with Stella better, he says. Alexandria, a psychology professor at Barnard College and author of several best-selling dog cognition books, echoes that sentiment. What I see first is a person wants to understand her dog's intentions and wishes, which I wholeheartedly endorse, she says. Hunger's observations of Stella are interesting in their own right, and if her claims were to pan out, it wouldn't be the first time an enthusiastic dog owner uncovered something new about dog cognition. Hare points out that Rico, a border collie who was famous for learning more than 200 words, was discovered by researchers after his owner called them with his findings. It's not unprecedented that people with their pets at home contribute in real important ways to our understanding of animals. But caution is warned too. While Hunger often describes her interactions with Stella as talking or chatting, in one post, Hunger even claims that I just had a conversation with my dog about having an acai bowl. There's an important distinction between Stella's button pushing and actually understanding the way that humans do. Mm-hmm. The tricky bit is that we humans are easily fooled by the sound of words, and we think that by using a word, one must know the meaning behind it. Going back to the conversation of dogs just knowing sit, right? Mm-hmm. Do they know what that meaning is, or do they know that that word predicts us getting them into the position? No differently than I tell people, the word is irrelevant. I could teach that watermelon means to do those things if I want to. Mm-hmm. And intend to use that word, just in the way humans do. There's definitely not always the case. A lyrebird mimicking someone yelling timber because they've heard somebody yelling timber is not themselves meaning to say timber. Stella pressing the buy and outside buttons in response to Hunger's question about going out to get acai bowls doesn't mean she actually understood the full gist of that sentence. Mm-hmm. Now, again, let's also specify that this Hunger person is the one with all of these certifications after her name.
Yeah.
So, we read into that, or we read into what she means by pushing buttons, and her vocabulary, and hence our interpretation, is limited by what buttons are available. Horwitz gives an example of this. What if the button said on Mars instead of later? Would we think that Stella meant it'll happen on Mars? When evaluating animals' behavior, Hare says it's important to think about the myriad ways that can be explained. British psychologist Lloyd Morgan came up with a rule that came to be known as Morgan's Canon. As Hare explains it, it's Occam's razor, but for behavior. Anytime you see a behavior, it doesn't mean it's underlain by the same psychology when it's performed by two different organisms. You prefer the simplest explanation until you can rule it out. In Stella's case, a similar explanation might be that she's pressing buttons because she knows something good might happen, or even that she's reading cues from her people and pressing the right buttons. So in this case, again, positive association with a lot of those buttons, or depending on how the board is set out, if we're gesturing towards one side or the other, say I'm standing on the left side of the board because I know that side is the good ones, and then, after they press that one, I move to the right side of the board, and that is adjectives or whatever it is, the things that would follow those words to mean when those things would happen. Mm-hmm. I could essentially cue using my body language how the dog may shape out a certain thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's likely that the dog is intentionally communicating, and it knows that if it interacts with these buttons, then good things will happen. Maybe it even has some idea of what type of good thing might happen, but we need more rigorous evidence to determine what. It's impossible to draw conclusions from Hunger's videos, though the caption certainly nudges towards what Hunger believes is happening. In one recent video, Stella presses Jake and outside. Hunger says this occurred after Stella heard Jake's car beep. Mm-hmm. So she's telling him, hey, something's beeping outside. My dog, too, frequently stands on the couch and keeps watch from the window when she hears my partner coming home. So I want to believe this one, but there are many things to consider that we can't see in this video without the full context of their interactions. It's hard to gauge what Stella means here, if she means anything at all. Did Stella press other buttons around the same time? And if so, what were they? That's another thing with this. When people are recording, this girl sits down in front of this board for like an hour a day and just films constantly so that she could take the clips of the times the dog hits the ones in the correct order. That's something I didn't even think about as far as this. If so, what were they? In other words, is there any reason these 2 button presses were particularly meaningful or indicative of her desires? It seems like Stella spends a lot of time saying outside. In fact, in another post, Hunger talks about the many different words Stella combines with outside. What, if any, implicit or explicit cues might she be reading for guidance on which buttons to press? And in the bigger picture, the videos don't give us context about Stella's usual behavior that could reveal patterns in her button pushing. How might her behavior change if provided with a different set of buttons? What buttons is she pressing that don't make it into videos? I noticed a few buttons in Stella's soundboard that haven't seen used in any videos. Kennel, Mad, and Water.
Mad?
Hare suggests a few ways to test this more rigorously. One technique psychology researchers frequently use to gauge consistency in studies is called inter-rater reliability, in which multiple people review the same evidence and their ratings are compared. If raters were to evaluate Stella's videos for an actual study, they might note things like whether Stella pressed a button, what order she pressed them, and how many times, and perhaps most importantly, if given the context, they would interpret her meaning in the same way. And looking through Stella's feed, there are a lot of things that would be opaque to an outsider. Stella, and Help Water outside are pretty inscrutable without Hunger's explanations. And those explanations are exactly what make the account compelling. But as lovely as Hunger's stories are, they're not scientific evidence. In the end, Stella's videos are less about her than they are about us. A lot of people strongly believe or want to believe that dogs are highly intelligent, and they are, but not necessarily for the reasons that Stella seems to be exhiberating. People love sciencey discoveries as long as they confirm what they believe, he says, but once you present evidence that challenges that, you're absolutely the turd in the punch bowl, he says. All right, so talked about that for a little bit there. So basically, in a nutshell, I think the common points we could stick out with this are the dogs are able to understand certain things, will predict certain things, but in the case of this, they're not able to actually talk to us in the context of that. And on a broader spectrum, I could, just like humans will make up stories of why their dogs do certain things from a behavioral issue standpoint, humans can also make up issues as far as virtually anything else. You can create a story for just about anything that you want to when presented with that situation. So, I don't know. Abby, I hope that answers exactly what you wanted to know about that. We talked pretty deep into that there.
Yeah, we did.
All right. So, random podcast, first step done here. So, we're going to get into some actual dog training stuff here next. So,
all right.
We've been talking about Caesar's Way book for a little bit there. I have a ton of different dog training books that I want to start burning through on this podcast here. Caesar's Way, I still want to finish with Emily and Krista here. But there is one section in it that we're going to start rolling through here. Just getting into issues with our dogs. So one thing I get asked very, very frequently is, what is the balance of obedience-related issues versus behavioral-related issues, right? So he has another book out here called Caesar's Rules, and Caesar's Rules is a cool book because I think it gets into more of the actual dog training standpoint of things, right? And his philosophies on how he would equate some of the dog training stuff into the dog behavior stuff that he works on and the living with your dog and all of that kind of stuff. So what I want to do is I want to read a couple of passages from Caesar's Rules where he talks first and foremost about that balancing of training versus behavioral issues, right? And then in that, he gets into some of the more important sides of things, which is, what do owners find as the most important things with their dogs? So we're going to start with this. He has a breakdown here of common issues that we would have with dogs, right? And basically what they did is they polled people on what are the most important things to them versus what are the least important things to them. So we're going to start with this. So when we look at things that we need our dog to be able to do, right? Let's look at coming when called. This is the first example here. I think most people would agree that this is one of the most important things they could have their dog do. If the dog doesn't know how to come when called, then you're never able to put them in a situation where they're off leash. You can't, frankly, even let them into your backyard, whether it's fenced in or not, because you're going to have to go out and chase them down every time you get out there. And it's a safety issue where even if you're not doing those things, if they get out of their house and they don't know how to come when called, they could run into the street, they could go run and chase down an animal or a person or whatever it may be. So coming when called on this list listed very important. He got an 85 that is very important, and there was no not important to this. So one of the more important ones that we could have. Coming when called, I would classify as a training-related thing. I don't care what kind of relationship you have with your dog. It's not going to guarantee they're going to come when called, because that's more of a complex behavior of teaching the dog a specific task, right?
Yeah.
Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that it's such a confidence booster with you and your dog to have that, to be able to have them come back to you.
For sure.
On command.
I mean, what like when we have people come in for lessons and we start working on that recall command, and the first time we go to fade that leash out, and the owner starts realizing, oh my gosh, like I can communicate with my dog and not need to physically pull them over to me. It's always a game changer.
It's that light bulb moment.
Light bulb moment, right? Gets along with other dogs and people, including kids. Same deal. Very high on the list. 83%. I mean, frankly, dogs, people, kids, I mean, those are kind of three separate things. Like listing those importance, I would say obviously people, kids, and then dogs in list of importance. But this is more of a socialization-related issue. This is more of a relationship-related issue. But it also stems from training, right? So in order to socialize our dog effectively with those types of things and to make sure that they're going to be okay with those types of things, we have to understand how to communicate boundaries to them. We have to understand how to communicate boundaries to other people and be able to implement that stuff effectively for it. So next one here, doesn't destroy house or yard. So getting a little bit lower here, 77% say it's very important. Now, I would say probably likely a lot of the reason why this one is not quite as important as the other two is because you can confine your dog easily. You can make sure that you keep your eyes on your dog and you can manage this one a little more effectively. Where coming when called, there's not really a way to manage it aside from keeping the dog on a leash all the time. Getting along with other dogs, people, and kids, the only way to manage that is just by not having them around those things. You could still have your dog in your house or in your yard as long as they're supervised without managing that thing. But again, we're getting into a training-related issue, right? This is an issue of not being able to communicate boundaries with your dog, right? Allows you to come and go without separation anxiety. Again, another one lower on the list, 69% here say this one is very important. And I would say that a lot of this probably has to do with the fact that I think a lot of people think certain separation anxiety-related issues are cute, right? They like that their dog gets upset when they leave the house, right?
Oh, he cares about me so much.
Yeah. So, 69% say that's important. Same deal. You could stick the dog in a crate. And frankly, here, my house, we're on about an acre here. So if my dog is freaking out and being anxious in the crate, it's not going to disrupt a whole lot of stuff going on. So a lot of people are not going to care as much about it. Where if you're in an apartment kind of setting or a townhouse or something like that, things like that get a little bit more important. Now, this one is the first one I would look at and say this is not solely, but much more a relationship-related issue. I think separation anxiety, though it can be genetic to some extent, I think that a lot of the things that we do with our dogs is what creates a lot of these separation anxiety-related problems, right? So when you're leaving the house, are you getting the dog all wound up and telling them, "Mommy will see you later. It'll be okay. Don't worry," right? And like getting them all hyped up and like playing with them and giving them all these pets and head scratches and then dipping out, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're doing that, you're putting the dog into a aroused state of mind, you're confining them, and then they don't know what to do with all of that energy, right? Same deal with when you come back. Are you creating this association that when you get back, the most exciting things in the world happen? Because if you are, that's going to create that problem as well. Now, the training side of the equation comes into the dogs that are genetically really bad with this kind of stuff, where you start needing to kind of create consequences for certain behaviors like destructive tendencies and stuff like that could help reduce those anxiety issues. But in the end of the day, that's the first one that's more of a behavioral related issue or relationship related issue. Walks on leash without pulling and heels on command. 69% important in this case. So again, we have a training related issue. Most people don't frankly care that much if the dog is going to be pulling a whole lot in these cases. I mean, I think unless it's really, really bad, most owners are pretty accustomed to having some degree of tension on the leash, so they don't really care that much about that. Travels easily in a car or crate, 49%. Again, an easy one to manage. You could stick the dog in the car, and if the dog is kind of bouncing around from place to place, even though I think that's one of the most dangerous things that can happen, most owners aren't going to care that much about that.
I love it when you see the dogs in their lap while they're driving. Like, are you kidding me?
So next, lies down or sits on command. Only 45% find this really, really important. Lies down and stays on command. Sorry. Sits on command, 44% important. To obedience-related things. Most people, as long as their dog is not doing a lot of the more important behavioral standpoint, so these first couple that are really important, coming when called, getting along with people, destroying the house, coming and going without separation anxiety, they don't care as much about that obedience standpoint. Protects you from bad guys. Only 22% find very important. And those 22% that find that very important are typically the ones that are not going to care a whole lot about a lot of these other things.
Yeah.
Retrieves or hunts, performs agility, plays frisbee, swims, displays other sport-related activities. 9% find very important. Does tricks. 3% find very important. Does guidance therapy chores, such as bringing you items you can't reach, turning on lights, opening doors, helping you cross the street. 3% find important. So what this is trying to kind of outline here for people is this is trying to outline what do people actually care about, right? Because in the end of the day, I think that a lot of people and a lot of trainers out there will focus a lot on the training standpoint, right? They focus on the obedience commands. They focus on getting the dog to stay and this and that. And what I've found is that when people come in for their sessions, one of the common things that they'll start asking me is, I don't want my dog to be a robot, right? I don't want to have to micromanage my dog all the time.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to have to be constantly using these commands. And, if they do break their downstay, why do I need to correct them so firmly for it and this and that? And I think these are all really fair points that he's trying to outline in this from the standpoint of if you really look at what the general population cares about when it comes to owning a dog, it's that they could live harmoniously with them. It's not necessarily that they could do all of this fancy schmancy stuff. It's that they could get away with teaching the dog how to exist with them with as little effort as possible on their part. Because when you start getting into some of these things that are much less cared about than other things, you start looking at those things and let's pull these up one more time here. These end ones, right? Protects you from bad guys, retrieves or hunts, does tricks, does therapy chores, sits on command, lies and stays. All of those things are things that are going to take significantly more effort from your part, right?
Yeah.
You have to go through the process of training and teaching all of those things and enforcing those things and using them regularly. And though there's some people out there, like the people with the soundboards and stuff like that want to spend all of that time with their dog, working with their dog. And again, not dogging super hard on the soundboard thing. I think that the psychology of teaching people that or telling people that like the dog actually understands some of this stuff is a little bit irresponsible because it creates a lot of other behavioral issues, right? But if you want to do different enrichment related activities like puzzles, or in this case, the soundboard thing is kind of just a puzzle. It's stimulating the dog's brain. They're trying to figure out how do I get responses or elicit things out of mom and dad, right? I think those things are positive, and I think teaching all these behaviors is positive, but most people out there that have dogs are fairly lazy, right? They're, I myself included, right?
Yeah.
I don't do all sorts of things with my dog. How often do you work with Bender outside of just like hanging out with him?
Not enough. Maybe once or twice a month, like really getting his brain stimulated, doing, obedience stuff, but definitely not enough, probably. I think we're all a little lazy.
So here's my next question for that. What's your ideal relationship with a dog? Like, what do you want out of owning a dog?
I guess just for me personally, I just want a dog that listens to me.
Sure.
I guess this is good for an outside point.
Yeah.
Not being a trainer is just when I want him to do something or if he knows not to do something, that's all I want. Just to have a calm household. When
you say that you want him to listen to you, what sorts of things do you mean when you say that?
Okay. I guess be waiting to eat. When I feed him, he has to lay down and he has to wait for command to be able to eat. Stay off the couch. Don't jump on people when they come in. Don't bark at people. Yes.
Sure. No.
I don't know.
No. That makes complete sense. And you're kind of hitting the nail on the head of what I kind of preach with people is that in the end of the day, if the dog not necessarily listened to you, but if the dog just understood what things you didn't want them to do,
Yes.
how often in your day-to-day would you actually need to get the dog to do something very specific? You know what I mean? So those examples, right? If your dog just didn't jump on your guess, right? And just stayed off the couch and just automatically just waited for their food before you told them it was okay to have it. And what were the other examples you used? I mean,
That was about it.
Yeah. So if he just didn't do those things, what other specific things would you need to get your dog to do? Right?
Nothing really. The rest would just be extra obedience.
Well, looking at this then, right? Coming when called, that would be a specific thing you would need to get him to do, even though he understood not to do those things.
Yep.
Right? Getting along with other dogs, people, and kids, right? Not destroying your house, but that kind of equates to things that you don't want the dog to do, right?
Yes.
Understanding those boundaries. Hey, don't jump on my couch.
Yeah.
Don't destroy my couch, right?
Yep.
Don't chew on my furniture, right? Don't dig holes in the garden, right? Allowing you to come and go without separation anxiety, right?
Yeah.
And walking well on a leash,
Yep.
And then you start getting into the less important ones of the lying down, the staying, the sitting, things like that, right? There are times when those things are necessary. There's times when I have people come over my house where even if they're not jumping on them, I need them to understand that I need them to just be out of the way, right? If it's Thanksgiving and people are coming in carrying side dishes and entrees and the turkey and stuff, even if they're not jumping, having a bunch of dogs at foot is not going to be very beneficial.
Exactly.
It's going to get in the way. If you have somebody coming over that's allergic to dogs, you need to be able to keep them out of the way. But frankly, the most important part of this is that the dog is just understanding what do we need them to not do, right? And as long as they can understand what not to do, you can live harmoniously with them. So I think what we're kind of trying to tie in here is that with all of these different things, we want to find balance first, right? We want to find balance amongst the dog being even-tempered and balance amongst them being stable and balance amongst them understanding the rules, first and foremost, which is why this book is called Caesar's Rules, Your Way to Train a Well-Behaved Dog. And if we could teach those things are kind of training, right? But at the same time, in the way that Caesar trains, a lot of those are just discipline related things. And same deal with us, right? I like to do a little bit of training before I go in and start disciplining for a lot of behaviors because I think it's more simple to give consequences once I've taught what's expected first in certain situations, or once I've, taken some of those tools that I prefer to use, like say the e-collar or the prong collar, and I've taught them in conjunction with certain behaviors. I think it's easier once you've taught some of those tools to then take those tools and implement them in more of a corrective fashion. But if you're just training the way Caesar does and you're just creating boundaries and consequences and using the little kind of hand poke, or the little side nudge with the foot kind of thing he does on the walk and everything, I think that you could do most of these things first without doing any sort of training. And then from there, you could teach only the core essentials. So let's say I got a dog in, right? And I've done this before as experiments. We used to do shorter board and train programs where we wouldn't teach the dog anything except how to walk on a leash and how to come when called. And then we would just correct for everything else, essentially. And what we found is that we wouldn't see much of a difference in the dog's temperament by the end of the program than if we did the full training program of all the obedience. Now, the owners like all of that obedience, and they like the ability to be able to get the dog into downstays and put them onto beds and this and that, right? Because it helps them feel like the dog listens to them more, right?
Yeah.
But in the end of the day, those dogs that we train that way, we still alleviated the problems by teaching less things and only focusing on the discipline first. So creating balance first. So let's dive into this a little bit here.
Okay.
Gotta catch my breath here. Start talking real fast there. All right, balance first. What is a balanced dog? I think of a balanced dog as one that is comfortable in his own skin. It is a dog that gets along with other dogs and people equally well. Also, by the way, I think I'm starting to realize that reading off my phone, do you find that like your eyes just can't focus well when you're doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. No.
I don't know what it is. I feel like I'm looking at this book right now and the words are like roughly the same size as they were on the phone, but like I feel like I could like actually focus on it. I felt like I was like stumbling over every word that I was saying. I was reading off my damn phone.
Yeah.
This technology out of here. I don't want your damn Kindle. Give me some books.
Stop giving me that.
Did you ever get a Kindle?
I never did.
No?
But aren't they supposed to not give you that same
It does
feeling.
have kind of a different type of
Yeah,
screen to it.
it's
I've never
supposed to-
had one before.
It's supposed to be like it's actually a page or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, so it's not super backlit, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know. I like books. I like turning pages and stuff, feeling
You like the
it,
physical.
Like the physical. All right. Anyways, what is balance? I think of a balanced dog as one that is comfortable in his own skin. It is a dog that gets along with other dogs and people equally well, that understands the patterns and routines of his life, but also welcomes new experiences, and that isn't handicapped by behavioral issues like fear, anxiety, or obsession. I've used the term balance around my colleague Martin Deely many times. Martin is a celebrity dog trainer for people that don't know him. So I asked him what the word has come to mean to him. What is balanced in my mind? Asked Martin. A dog that is sound in body and mind. A healthy dog is the easy answer. Physical health is easy one to identify. If a dog has any pain or is not feeling good, then obviously it does not train easily and may not even want to train or accommodate your requests. Health, though, can affect the mental state, so we need to ensure that we have a healthy puppy as the foundation of a trainable dog. This is something we see all the time. So people like to ask, what age is too old to train a dog? And I always say it's 100% dictated on their health, because here's the thing. We've worked with dogs through 9 or 10 years old that train just as easily as any other dog, assuming they're in good physical health, right? Some of these dogs at 9 and 10 act like they're like fucking 5, right? I've also seen younger dogs. I have a dog that just came in for lessons 2 weeks ago, started, and it was a multi-dog household. She signed up for training for both of them. She brought both of the dogs in, and they're not very old. I think the one is like 1 or 2 and the other is like 6, somewhere around there.
Okay.
The 6-year-old dog had like double torn ACLs and stuff. One of them had like some additional injury happen to its knee, and I could just see as it was walking, like the knee just like, kind of like kicking out to the side, and like anytime we would make him turn or anything like that, just seemed like he was in pain, man. You know? And she was having issues with this dog in the house with like different aggression related stuff towards the other dogs, and it was starting to become a mess. And I was like, listen, this dog is clearly in discomfort right now, and these issues you're having with the other dogs in the house, they're newer issues, right? That you didn't have them all the time, and I think a lot of that has to do with the dog is not as tolerant to all of the other dogs' antics due to the physical discomfort, right? So because of that, you have one of two options, right? You have to, one, get that issue resolved and figure out what sort of surgery or medication or whatever does the dog need to be on to decrease that discomfort. Or two, you need to start adjusting and altering your approach to how you're interacting with your dogs from the standpoint of, if we can't fix that problem with that dog and make it more tolerant by decreasing its discomfort, we need to go the other extreme and create better advocation for that dog from the standpoint of the other dogs, right? Maybe the other dogs just need to leave him alone for a little bit. You know, maybe like literally they're not even allowed to go up and sniff him or go lay next to him or anything like that. And you create those boundaries to help him feel more comfortable. And this is the same deal with, well, if people call and they'll have like a 14-year-old dog or a 15-year-old dog. The dog's probably going to live another year, right? And same deal. They're having issues amongst the house. And it's like, we're not going to go in and we're not going to train that, because this dog is probably so miserable at this point, just being uncomfortable and all this kind of stuff, that it's not fair for us to try and go in and try to fix that dog in that case, because that's what's causing the issue. So going to this book here, the balance first, I would agree that physical health and well-being of the dog is a very important side of things. Now, I think people get overboard with that, right? And I think some people will look for reasons why the dog is behaving the way they are when they're not actually there, but it is something you have to be aware of. All right, back to the book. Ian Dunbar has a very personal story about a dog whose health affected his ability to be trained. I have a Rottie and Red-Bone Coonhound mix. He's getting pretty old now, and he blew out his cruciate. And so he had a TPLO, tibial plateau leveling ostomy operation, a tremendous operation. You go in and the dog walks out 2 days later. Within 3 days, his entire personality changed. He became a totally happy, silly dog. We realized we'd been living with a dog for 5 years who was in extreme pain, and that's why he was slow to sit, slow to come, slow to lie down. After this operation, we had a totally different dog on our hands, so there may be very good reasons why the dog doesn't want to come or sit. Again, I completely agree with that. Those are primarily with more serious health conditions, though. This is not just, your young dog is being slow on the recall, so they're probably in pain. You got to be aware of that side of things, too. But definitely keep those things in mind. When there's the mental, psychological side of balance, What am I looking for in a mentally stable dog or a balanced mind? Martin Deely ponders. Like in ourselves, stability in dogs comes from rules, structure, and stability in life. We know what is going to happen. We know what to expect, and we are confident in how it all occurs. Even new situations, new people, new dogs, and other animals are approached with confidence and acceptance. If your dog is to achieve balance, he must be fulfilled as an animal first, then as a dog, then whatever breed he happens to be, and then as your specific individual dog with a particular name. You could read more in-depth explanations and instructions on how to create balance in your dog in some of my earlier books. Here I provide what I consider the basics for creating a balanced dog. So let's see what these are.
Okay.
Caesar's rules for a balanced dog. When you bring a dog into your life, don't just think of what you want from him. Think first of what you need to give this dog to make him happy under your roof. Start by thinking of your dog as an animal, then as a dog, then as a breed, then as a name, and fulfill your dog's needs in that order. In my experience, once you've fulfilled those needs of your dog, he will automatically want to fulfill your needs in return. I don't know about that last part, but we have to make sure that we are fulfilling them from a standpoint of mental and physical exercise, mental being the most important. I tell people when they come in for their first one-on-one session, your dog will be the most tired you've ever seen them in their life after that first or second session, right? It's the first time that they have been mentally stimulated in a way like that, because everything else we've done with them, the walks, throwing the ball, playing with the toys, they're not mental stimulation. They're physical stimulation. And though that will short-term tire the dog out, the mental stimulation is what they need. Animals are not designed, particularly dogs, are not designed for long, extended periods of physical exercise. They're designed and intended for short bursts of it, but they're designed and intended to process information, and they're designed and intended to kind of dissect a lot of the things going on around them and figure out, how do we hunt, how do we do this, how do we find all of the things that we're looking for and utilize their brains like that, because that's what makes them tired.
I think that's a big thing people miss too. They don't understand how much importance that is for having mental stimulation for their dog. Like you said, it's always throw the ball, do this, do that. But I think it is so surprising when you have a dog come in for the first time to get trained and how incredibly exhausted.
Yeah.
And you're just like, all we did was walk down the street and
Literally
back.
nothing. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the times when those dogs come in for that first session, they're staying in one room. They're not really moving around that much. They're just using their brain and figuring out how to process and problem solve things.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially, when they have these wiry dogs, they're like, oh, they always have so much stamina and energy. And then, a half-hour session, and then they're out like a light.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And that goes back to, again, the conversation we had about the soundboards and the puzzles and all that kind of stuff. The problem is not with those activities that you're doing with your dog, because those will, to some extent, create mental stimulation, right? It's just, it's the humanizing side of things that's the problem. So, Number 2, of course you want a dog to love, but love is not the first or only thing dogs need to be happy. Just as with most humans, love alone is not enough. Follow my 3-part formula of exercise, discipline, rules, boundaries, and limitations. So this includes training and affection in that order. So we talk about this all the time. Love creates problems because we give the love to our dogs in situations where they don't know what it means, right? We give the love to them in the situations when they're stressed out, which is just giving them positive reinforcement, reinforcing those negative states of mind that the dog is in. We give them the love in the situations when we're trying to stop them from jumping all over us or stop the separation anxiety or whatever it may be, which just further reinforces those things. Love should only be given, or, I don't typically like using that word for it. I prefer just affection, because that's how you share the love, right? The affection should only be shared with our dogs after we've accomplished all of the things we want to accomplish first. And that could even be rewards, right? The rewards in my training program don't get implemented until the dog understands what it is that I want first, right? That way I'm not clouding anything. That way I'm accomplishing the actual goal, which is getting that dog into a more compliant, disciplined state of mind, which is number 2 of this, right? And then obviously the exercise. So fulfilling the dog through exercise, making sure that they're not super pent up and full of energy, even though lack of exercise is not an excuse for the dog not listening to you. If we tackle that first, we're making things fair, right? Okay. If a dog is in a crate for 23 hours a day for a week straight and we take them out, it's still not an excuse for them to jump on me or to bite my guests or this or that, right? But it's going to make it significantly harder for them to not do those things.
Yeah.
Right? So exercise first, the discipline through creating the consequences for those things they shouldn't be, and then the affection in that order. So next thing. Exercise. Oh, this just breakdowns those things. Exercise means at least 1 and preferably 2 long walks a day, 45 minutes or longer. That is a lot of walking. He used to talk about that all the time. I mean, you're talking an hour and a half of walking a day. That'd be nice. If I have clients that do that. I don't know how they block out the time to do so. 30 minutes minimum, depending on your dog's breed, size, energy level, and age. Letting your dog run free in your backyard doesn't cut it. By exercise, I mean a structured walk with you by his side. This fulfills your dog's needs to work for food and water in concert with his pack. It's also the single most powerful tool you have at your disposal for creating a deep, meaningful bond with your dog. And on top of that, it's free. Walking is great. I don't do anywhere near as much of it with my dogs as I should, but I do say that the purpose of the walk is 1, exercise, but 2, it's a great opportunity for giving that mental stimulation. Like he says here, letting your dog run free in your backyard doesn't cut it. The reason for that is because the dog's in autopilot when they're doing that. If I just stick my dogs outside for 2 hours, they're just going to be farting off, doing whatever they want to do. They're just going to be actively running around. Oh, I see this. I want to go chase this, or I'm going to be in autopilot doing this, or whatever, And they're burning off physical activity by moving around, right? And running and jumping and playing and stuff like that. But they're not thinking and actively problem solving. And if you're combining the two by doing your structured walking and your healing, I always say, you can walk your dog for 3 miles a day in a non-structured fashion. If you take them for a 15-minute long structured walk, you're going to find they're more tired from that. Discipline. Your dog's mother began teaching him rules, boundaries, and limitations from the second he took his first breath. Rules aren't something your dog resents. They are something he craves. Your job as a dog owner is to be clear and simple about these rules and to always remain consistent about them. It's important for any balanced dog to know the parameters of his world and where he stands in his pack. The rules are the important part, right? Because like we talked about before, if you have the rules established and your dog doesn't jump on your guests, doesn't rush out the door, if they don't steal food off your counter, don't destroy your house, do all of those different things, the training becomes secondary and you don't need it as much to micromanage your dog. I always want to live with my dogs in a way where I could give as little micromanagement as possible. And if they don't do those things, I don't care if they lay down over there, they sit over there, they stand over there, or they walk circles around the living room. Any of the above is okay. Last one, affection. Affection doesn't necessarily mean petting, and it doesn't necessarily mean treats. First and foremost, it means the bond of trust and respect between human and dog. A person with no arms can have a bond of affection with her dog, even if she's unable to pet him. That's a good point there. A lot of people think petting is everything. Affection is just that energy that you share with whatever it is, showcasing that you care about it, right? And that could come in any sort of different forms. The beautiful thing about dogs is that when you show them honor and respect, they return the same to you 1,000-fold. Dogs are perhaps the most generous and fair beings on the planet. Beyond that, being affectionate with your dog in any form, sharing games, toys, adventures, treats, and of course, massages, petting is an incredibly good and therapeutic for you as well as for the dog.
Boom.
Balance, guys. Balance is going to be the topic of the next couple of podcasts that we kind of dive through here. What I want to do is I'm going to move away from Caesar over the next few, and I'm going to start digging into a couple more modern trainers that have different viewpoints on how we find the balance of the exercise, the discipline, and the affection, because Caesar kind of started a lot of the talk of getting used to how do we live with the dogs. He started the talk of how do we start disciplining our dogs for different things. And, how do we combine all of that in a way that makes sense to the animal, right? From there have been a lot of trainers that have adopted very similar philosophies. There have been trainers that have worked directly with him and kind of correlated it into the modern world that do a lot of different dog training. They focus a lot more heavily on the obedience side of things, but they've been able to take a lot of those concepts he talked about and implement them into today's world of all of the things we're seeing with behavioral issues with our dogs and how we're humanizing them and doing all of those different things. So I have a couple different books we're going to dive into on that kind of stuff, and we're going to start discussing that balance. We're going to discuss why some of these things are important. We're going to use, like I said, different ways to kind of teach those types of things, and kind of hopefully move this along in different directions here. So hour and 15 minutes in. We're going to wrap this one up on that. It's going to be a little bit shorter of one today, but just diving into some random topics and seeing what we get. So a lot of talk about enrichment in dogs, a lot of talk about not humanizing some of the things they're doing, discussing some of those questions we had about the soundboards and what we think about that, and then getting into just creating balance with our dogs and kind of diving one more time into that philosophy of things. So if you guys need anything in between now and then, you could find us at David the Dog Trainer, Miracle Canine Training, miraclecaninetraining.com. Dobe, last thoughts?
I'm really excited, actually, for the talk about balance, because I definitely feel you see it a lot, that there's not much balance in a lot of these people that you have that come into Miracle. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that people need to understand. Like, you have to have this balance. You can't have just over or under. I mean, if you want, I mean, that's what balance is
Sure.
the perfect of that. But I think I'm really excited as someone that's not a dog trainer to hear how we get balance.
How do we get the balance?
How do we get the balance?
A lot of ways. We'll figure out more on that as we go. But
yes,
I think it's good. You know, like I said, I think that we need to understand how to achieve all those different things and figure out how do we find that balance with our dogs. So, like I said, we'll dig into that a little bit more as we go. If not, we will see you guys next time.
have a good one.